It was late autumn in Georgia, 1984, the kind of season where the air smelled of pine and smoke from the first wood fires of the year. The small town of Tifton, tucked along Interstate 75, lived at an easy rhythm. Church on Sundays, high school football on Fridays, and quiet evenings when the streets emptied before 9. But on the night of November 3rd, that peace fractured forever. 17-year-old Caroline Brooks was last seen leaving the Tifton Public Library just after 8:30 p.m. She was a senior at Monroe High, known for her quiet smile and the sketchbook she carried everywhere. Her father, Henry Brooks, worked nights at the paper mill, and her mother often waited by the kitchen window until Caroline's headlights appeared on the driveway. But that night, they never did. The next morning, when her car, a rust-colored Pontiac Sunbird, was found on the shoulder of Old Omega Road, doors locked and keys missing, panic settled over Tifton. Her purse and sketchbook were gone, but her denim jacket was folded neatly in the passenger seat. The car was parked so straight it looked deliberate, as if she had pulled over to meet someone she knew. Sheriff's deputies searched the surrounding woods, but rain the previous night had erased every footprint. Caroline's friends insisted she had no enemies, no boyfriend, no reason to run away. She was quiet, one classmate told reporters, but she loved this town. She wouldn't just disappear. The investigation began the way small-town cases often did, hopeful but thin. Officers went door to door, questioning nearby residents. One man mentioned hearing a truck engine idling on the road late that night. Another claimed he saw headlights near the old railway crossing around 9. Nothing concrete, no witnesses. By the second week, flyers were stapled to every telephone pole in Tifton. Missing teen, last seen November 3rd, 1984. Her school organized a vigil, and hundreds gathered under candlelight at the football field, holding hands as the pastor prayed for her safe return. But deep down, most people already knew. When hunters stumbled upon a shallow grave nearly 3 months later, 30 miles from town, the hope that had held the community together collapsed. Inside, they found the remains of a young woman wrapped in a floral bedsheet. Her skull showed blunt force trauma. Her hands were bound. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. It was Caroline Brooks. The news shattered the town. The Brooks family withdrew from the public eye, their porch light burning every night until dawn. Her mother stopped speaking to reporters entirely, telling a local pastor, "They said time would help. But time doesn't help when your child is waiting for justice." Detective Samuel Crow of the Tift County Sheriff's Office took over the case. Crow was 35, meticulous, and quietly stubborn, the kind of man who never stopped chasing ghosts. But even he knew the odds. There was no DNA testing in 1984, no national database, no digital trail to follow, just a single tire print near the burial site, cigarette butts nearby, and one piece of cloth that matched Caroline's jacket. He built his case the old-fashioned way: interviews, intuition, and maps spread across his desk. He questioned construction workers who'd been in the area, truck drivers who stopped at the nearby diner, even a few ex-cons from Valdosta rumored to pass through Tifton that fall. But one by one, every lead died. By the following spring, Caroline's file was stamped inactive, insufficient evidence. The Brooks family never accepted it. Every year, on November 3rd, they placed white flowers on the side of Old Omega Road where her car had been found. Then, time did what it always does. The case faded into whispers. Crow retired in the late 1990s. The Brooks family moved away. Caroline became one more unsolved name in Georgia's cold case files. It stayed that way for nearly 4 decades, until a quiet breakthrough in 2024 would bring it all back. The car, the truck, the cigarette butts, the rain. Everything that had once been buried under time was about to surface again. The spark came from a statewide forensic initiative. Georgia's Cold Case Unit, in partnership with a private DNA lab, began retesting preserved evidence from unsolved crimes between 1975 and 1990, when the technician opened the old brown evidence box labeled Brooks. Caroline, 1984. Inside were 2 cigarette butts sealed in plastic, a strip of duct tape, and a single hair. The samples were degraded but intact enough for modern testing. And in early February 2024, the results came back with a match, one that would lead investigators down a trail so unexpected. It stunned even the oldest detectives on the team. The DNA belonged to Earl Donnelly, a long-haul truck driver who had died in 2001. His record was thin, one assault charge dismissed. 2 DUIs, but he'd spent years on the same route that passed through Tifton. Investigators found that Donnelly had worked at a construction site near the very field where Caroline's car had been discovered. He had lived in a rented trailer just 8 miles away during that fall of 1984, but what truly connected him wasn't just the DNA. It was a letter found in his personal belongings after his death. The letter, dated December 1984, was addressed to his brother in South Carolina. It read, "I keep seeing her face. I didn't mean to, but it happened too fast. The rain covered everything. I think I'm losing my mind." It was unsigned. Investigators had never known it existed until now. When the Georgia Bureau of Investigation reopened the Brooks case officially in April 2024, it wasn't just about solving a murder. It was about resurrecting a story buried beneath decades of silence. For Tifton, the name Caroline Brooks resurfaced on the news like a ghost from another time. People who'd long stopped talking about that night started remembering details: headlights near the bridge, a man in a denim jacket at the diner, an unfamiliar truck parked by the library. Old memories, small pieces, finally forming a picture, and at the center of it was a truth so long hidden, so deeply buried it would shake George's quiet heart once more. Because justice, it seemed, had simply been waiting for its turn. The morning light crept through the blinds of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's Cold Case Division as Detective Lena Carter stared at the faded photograph of Caroline Brooks. The image had been scanned from the original 1984 missing poster. Caroline's soft smile, her eyes confident yet shy. The same face that had haunted her small town for 40 years. Lena wasn't born when Caroline disappeared, but she'd heard the name growing up. Her father had been a deputy in Tifton County back then, one of the men who searched the woods. He used to say, "That road still remembers." Now, decades later, Lena was standing at the edge of that same road, holding the same case file her father once carried. The first step was confirming the DNA hit. The lab results left little room for doubt. Earl Donnelly, long-haul truck driver, deceased since 2001. The odds of a false match were less than 1 in 10 billion. Lena leaned back in her chair, exhaling as she stared at the black-and-white mugshot of Donnelly from 1979. Heavy-set, mid-30s, with deep-set eyes that somehow looked both blank and angry. But there was a problem. Donnelly had died over 20 years ago. If justice was going to be served, it would have to come in another form, through truth, through acknowledgement. Still, there were unanswered questions. Why Caroline? How did he know her? Lena started by retracing his movements in 1984. Donnelly had been employed by Hartfield Logistics, hauling building materials between Valdosta and Atlanta, a route that passed directly through Tifton. Payroll logs confirmed he'd clocked in on November the 2nd, but never completed his scheduled delivery for November 3rd, the night Caroline disappeared. Back then, it wouldn't have raised suspicion. Drivers often ran behind schedule, paperwork misplaced. But when Lena pulled the original delivery ledger from archives, one small detail froze her. Someone had written, "Truck returned, 3:48 a.m., wet, smell of fuel," beside his name. No one had followed up. Lena drove down to Tifton that afternoon. The town had changed. Strip malls where gas stations once stood, fast food lights where the fields used to stretch open. But some things remained the same. The library was still there, the same red brick building with its tall front windows. She stood in the parking lot, picturing Caroline walking out that November night, clutching her books against the rain. An older librarian recognized the name instantly. "Caroline Brooks?" she said softly. "I remember her. Sweet girl. Used to sit right there by the window drawing pictures. Her mama came in for years after. Still checked the lost and found shelf like maybe Caroline would come back for something." The woman pointed toward the glass doors. "They say she was seen walking that way." Toward the corner store. Lena followed the direction. The corner store was gone now, replaced by a laundromat. But when she looked at the old street layout, she saw that it connected to Old Omega Road, the same route where Caroline's car had been found. The reconstruction back at the GBI office. Lena assembled a timeline using every witness report, every clue the 1984 team had gathered. 30 p.m. Caroline leaves the library. 8:45 p.m. Light rain begins. 9:10 p.m. Truck engine reportedly heard near the Old Omega Bridge. 9:25 p.m. Caroline's car seen pulled over on the shoulder. 9:30 p.m., 2 a.m. No activity logged, no witnesses, 5 hours erased by rain. She called forensic analyst Dr. Noah Kim, who had helped confirm the DNA match. If Donnelly's DNA was on those cigarettes, she asked, what are the odds he wasn't the killer? 0, Kim said flatly. Those were inside the duct tape evidence bag. He wasn't a witness. He was right there. The more Lena uncovered, the more disturbing the picture became. Donnelly's trucking routes in the 1980s overlapped with at least 3 other unsolved disappearances across southern Georgia and northern Florida. All young women, all near rest stops or small-town libraries, all vanishing on rainy nights. What started as one solved cold case was beginning to look like the profile of a serial offender. The break in the pattern Lena visited, Donnelly's last known address, a decaying mobile home on the outskirts of Valdosta, now owned by his nephew, Chris Donnelly. The man was in his late 40s, nervous but cooperative. Uncle Earl? He said when she showed the badge. I remember him. Mean drunk but quiet most days. Died of a stroke in his sleep. I didn't know he hurt anyone. When she mentioned Caroline's name, his expression changed. You're talking about that girl from Tifton, right? I remember hearing something back then. Uncle Earl came home that week. He burned his clothes in the backyard. My dad told him he was crazy. Lena's hand tightened on her pen. He said that? Chris nodded. Yeah, said Earl told him he'd hit a deer, but he looked off. Didn't talk for days after. Then he left for South Carolina. Never went back to Tifton again. That was enough. It wasn't just DNA, it was context. Opportunity, proximity, and confession through behavior. She took a sample of soil from the yard where the clothes were burned. Even decades later, traces of melted fabric fibers were embedded deep in the earth. Forensics confirmed the material matched the same polyester blend used in 1980s Pontiac seat upholstery, the same kind found in Caroline's car. It was the final connection, the return to Tifton. June 2024, the GBI hosted a press conference at the Tifton County Courthouse. Rows of reporters filled the hall, lights glaring off the polished wood. Detective Lena Carter stepped to the podium, flanked by photographs of Caroline Brooks and Earl Donnelly. After 40 years, she began, we can now confirm that the murder of 17-year-old Caroline Brooks has been solved. Through forensic DNA analysis and corroborating evidence, we've identified her killer as Earl Donnelly, a long-haul truck driver who worked in this region during the 1980s. Though deceased, his accountability is now part of public record. A hush fell across the room. Reporters scribbled. Cameras clicked. Lena continued, her voice steady. This case represents what modern technology and persistence can achieve. And more importantly, what justice means, even after decades of waiting. In the crowd sat Martha Brooks, Caroline's mother, now 81, frail but alert. Her trembling hands clutched a framed photo of her daughter. When Lena stepped down, Martha whispered, "Thank you for not letting her be forgotten." The detective's eyes softened. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "we never stop for the ones who wait." The aftermath Tifton changed after that day. The name Caroline Brooks appeared on memorial ribbons, murals, and a scholarship fund at Monroe High for aspiring art students. The Georgia Cold Case Division named the program that cracked her case the Brooks Initiative. Reporters revisited the old timeline, piecing together the errors that delayed justice. Missing reports, untested evidence, ignored witness calls. Each detail revealed how close they'd come to catching Donnelly back in 1984, and how easily she might have been saved. For Lena, the case wasn't just another solved file. It was a lesson, a warning. Every unsolved folder in the archive represented a voice still calling through time. Late one evening, she sat alone in the evidence room, staring at the brown box marked Brooks. Caroline, closed 2024. Inside lay the same duct tape, the same cigarettes, the same thin line of hair that had changed everything. She placed the lid back gently. Outside, the rain had started again, light at first, then steady, like it had that night in 1984. Sometimes the sky remembers too. The rain had stopped by dawn, leaving the streets of Tifton washed clean, the kind of quiet that follows a storm when the world feels new but heavy. Detective Lena Carter sat in her unmarked car outside the old Brooks residence, now a pale yellow house on the edge of town with ivy climbing its porch rails. Inside, the lights were on. She knew Mrs. Brooks hadn't slept much since the announcement. For 40 years, she had gone to bed without answers. Now she was waking up with the truth. Lena stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath her boots. The front door creaked open before she could knock. Martha Brooks stood there, small and fragile, wrapped in a shawl the color of faded lilacs. "You look tired, Detective," she said softly. "Come in before the coffee gets cold." Inside, the house was a time capsule. Family photos lined the walls. Caroline as a child, her sketchbook in hand, her smile frozen in 1984. On the mantel was a candle that had burned every November since her disappearance. It was still half melted, its wick blackened from decades of grief. "I wanted to thank you again," Martha said, setting down 2 mugs. "I prayed for this day so long I started to think I'd never live to see it." Lena hesitated. "Mrs. Brooks, I wish the man responsible could face a courtroom. But I hope knowing his name, knowing what happened, gives you some peace." Martha nodded.
"Peace?"
she whispered. "Maybe not peace, but knowing that helps me breathe again." She walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. The morning light spilled across Caroline's photograph, her graduation picture, the one her mother had always kept by the window. "She would have been 57 this year," Martha said quietly. "She wanted to be an art teacher. You know that?" Lena shook her head. She said she wanted to teach kids how to draw what they felt, not just what they saw. She was like that. Always saw more than the rest of us. The silence between them carried more weight than words. After a moment, Lena placed her hand on Martha's shoulder. "She'd be proud of you," she said. "You never stopped believing she deserved the truth." Martha's voice trembled. "No mother ever does." When Lena left the house, she didn't drive straight to Atlanta. She took a detour. Old Omega Road, the same road where Caroline's car had been found 40 years ago. The trees had grown taller, their branches bending toward the asphalt like they too remembered. She parked by the curve near the old railway crossing, stepping out into the thick morning air. The sound of distant thunder rolled across the sky. The smell of wet earth lingered, sharp, familiar, haunting. Standing there, Lena replayed the investigation in her mind. The evidence box, the cigarette butts, the old letter confessing guilt. Every piece had built a bridge from the past to the present. It struck her that sometimes justice wasn't about punishment. It was about presence, about making sure the truth finally had somewhere to land. She looked down at the small brass plaque the town had installed months earlier. In memory of Caroline Brooks, gone but never forgotten. 1984 to 2024, fresh flowers rested at its base, rain still clinging to their petals. She wondered who had left them. Maybe one of Caroline's old classmates, maybe someone who'd just heard her story. Either way, it meant she was remembered. The legacy 2 weeks later. The Georgia State Capitol held a ceremony honoring the cold case unit. The Brooks Initiative, named after Caroline, had already begun expanding to cover unsolved cases statewide. New funding, new labs, and new hope. When Lena took the stage to speak, she didn't bring notes. Her words came slow and steady. 40 years ago, a young girl disappeared on her way home. Her case grew cold, but her story didn't. This case taught us that time doesn't erase truth. It only buries it. And it's our job to keep digging. The crowd of officers and families stood silent. Some wiped their eyes. Others clapped softly, reverently. After the ceremony, Martha Brooks approached Lena one last time. She handed her a small envelope sealed with trembling hands. Inside was a sketch, one of Caroline's original drawings, preserved after all these years. It showed a sunrise over a quiet road, drawn in pencil and smudged at the corners. "She made that the week she disappeared," Martha said. "She used to say sunrise was her favorite time. She said it felt like a promise." Lena swallowed hard. "I'll keep it with her file," she said. "It belongs where her story lives." The truth buried, finally revealed. That night, Lena returned to her office and placed the sketch inside the evidence box. Then she sealed it for the last time and labeled it, Brooks Caroline, case closed. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft against the windows. The same rain that had hidden her killer now whispered against the glass, as if to say goodbye. Lena switched off the lights and stood for a moment in the darkness. She thought of Caroline's smile, of the red Pontiac left by the road, of a mother's porch light burning every night for 40 years. And she thought about what justice really meant. Not revenge, Not victory, but remembrance. As she walked out of the building, she caught her reflection in the glass door, tired eyes but steady. In her pocket, the small piece of paper with Caroline's sketch felt warm from her hand. The world outside was quiet again. For the first time in decades, so was Georgia. Because finally, the truth that had been buried for 40 years was no longer lost. It was heard. And as the last echo of thunder faded in the distance, one final line lingered in her mind. The same words that had closed every cold case she'd ever worked. And every story worth remembering. Sometimes justice doesn't fade with time. It waits.